The Denver Broncos blast the Arizona Cardinals in Sunday's 24-15 win, led by Justin Simmons' two-interception performance and Latavius Murray with a big game on the ground. What did the Denver Broncos do to rally for 21 straight points in the second half to win this game? You get that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in, making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day. Every single day, you can get this podcast free and available everywhere you get your podcast in audio format, or you can watch us on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe and that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. Sayre, my friend, here we are. We finally, after a 5-game losing streak, get to have a Victory Monday episode, Locked on Broncos. A strong second half after a very, very abysmal first half start for this Denver Broncos team. Obviously, in the second half, a lot of good things going on the ground, led by Latavius Murray and Marlon Mack.
Right, that running game really became the story of the game for the Denver Broncos here. And yes, we're talking about the 4-10 Denver Broncos, who now have beaten the 4-10 Arizona Cardinals. We understand that it's a game, it's just a game, basically an exhibition game at this stage of the season. But we talked about this during the week leading up to the game. It's still meaningful for the Denver Broncos. We're still looking in evaluation mode for this team. We're looking at who might be on this team beyond this season. And I think Cody, Latavius Murray, over the course of this year, since he's joined the Denver Broncos, he's really making a very strong case. This was the most successful running game the Denver Broncos offense has had all season, easily. And I feel like you could feel that throughout the game as well. Latavius Murray led the way with a season-high 130 yards on 24 carries, got to get into the end zone for a touchdown, like you mentioned, one of 3 touchdowns there in the second half, a barrage of scoring for the Denver Broncos in the second half there. So really great to see. Latavius Murray is running hard. He's running with confidence. There's not a lot of, flash there, right? But when he gets north and south, man, that 6'3", 230-pound frame is very different. Guys don't really want to get in his way. Let's just put it that way. And he always, like we heard from Ross Jackson, remember back when the Broncos first signed him off the Saints practice squad, he's always going to fall forward for that extra 2 yards, that extra 3 yards. That has been absolutely accurate, I would say, in regards to Latavius Murray, and a scouting report about him and just who he is as a player. He's been available. He's been consistent. He's seemingly been getting better and better, Cody. I was really excited to see him play well in this game. He deserved it. With all the hard work he's put in, all the poor offensive outputs the Broncos have had this season, he goes out there and has a big game. You love to see it.
He earned his first career game ball as well, which is wild to think about considering he had a pretty big performance against the Broncos just a couple of years ago with 2 touchdowns in that game in Denver, by the way. But obviously for him, 130 yards on the ground. The Broncos offense had over 170 yards rushing. This is their highest output of the season. They had 142 total in week 2 against the Houston Texans there. Marlon Mack, obviously a little bit of a surprise, but really the story for this Broncos offense, the first half, Sayre, it was brutal. They go into halftime trailing 9-3, and really the story of the game, injuries on the offensive line continued to plague the Broncos. They lose Quinn Miners in the first series. He gets poked in the eye, did not return in this game. He's going to be considered day-to-day at this point going forward. Tom Compton, who came in relief of Quinn Miners after he went down with the injury, he got hurt in the game with a back injury and is also missing some time. So the Broncos overcame some adversity, not to mention giving up 6 total sacks in the first half to the Arizona Cardinals. J.J. Watt coming away with 3 of them. At that point, we're like, oh, man, thank goodness Russell Wilson didn't play in this game because he would have taken some shots. I mean, Brett Rypien at halftime sacked 6 times in this game. He was hit 8 times in just one half a play. That was not ideal, and it begs, I think, some deeper issues that we'll address this week here on Locked on Broncos as it pertains to the offensive line, the shuffling of the lineups. But it is a victory episode of today, so we will not dwell on the negative on today's episode of the show. We'll dive into the positive. But I think as well, another output of where the Broncos put up 24-plus points in consecutive weeks Sayre, that is progress. It's nice to see. And I think a lot of it is accumulated from the Broncos defense getting some takeaways and the offense capitalizing it and kind of it being a mutually beneficial relationship between both sides. All of that came in the second half after Denver trailed 9-3, 21 unanswered in the second half. That was big for this Denver Broncos football team led by Brett Rypien. Hey, we have to give a shout out. Eric Tomlinson, a guy who literally just puts on his hard hat, has his lunch pail every single day, just comes to work and blocks his tail off and really doesn't see much action in the passing game. He had a couple of big catches in this game. He had 3 that I recall. He had one dump off for a first down. He had a catch and run and a rally to the 3-yard line for a first down that set up Marlon Mack 3 yards out to score for the Broncos' first touchdown of the game. And then he had a touchdown reception, the back corner of the end zone from Brett Rypien in the fourth quarter. Shout out to Eric Tomlinson, as Nathaniel Hackett calls him, the Viking. He doesn't say much. He just comes to work and does his job. And the Broncos, they blast the Arizona Cardinals 24-15, led by the offense and defense's valiant effort in the second half. Broncos capitalized to improve to 4-10. How about the defensive side of the ball for this Denver Broncos football team? They made a big-time statement in Sunday's when we dive into a key performance by one of the Broncos' top defensive players and more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. But this show is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual, so when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. Therapists, they're trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and to learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere, 100% online. I've utilized BetterHelp and I've benefited from it extensively. Meet with my therapist 1 time a week with the app, and it's super easy. All you do is you fill out a form when you sign up at BetterHelp, and you get matched to a therapist. And if you feel like you and your therapist aren't vibing well, you can change therapists at any time. And everyone deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. As the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. All the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And our friends at LinkedIn. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates that are available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And it's easy to create a free job post in minutes at LinkedIn Jobs. Then all you do is you add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread word that you're hiring. And simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to hire to finish out the 2022 year on a strong note with the right team member. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, sir, continue on today's episode, Locked On Broncos post-game report. The Broncos, they improved to 4-10 on the season after blasting the Arizona Cardinals 24-15 at Empower Field at Mile High. Just want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platforms, or whether you're watching us on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that like, comment on the video as well for the algorithm. Engage with other members in Broncos country. Share your thoughts on the Broncos victory on Sunday. Sayre, the Broncos, they improved to a very interesting 2-1 record as it stands right now against NFC West teams. This upcoming week, they'll have a chance to maybe make that 3-1 against the NFC West because they are going to play the Los Angeles Rams on the road in LA on Christmas Day. We'll see how things go. Russell Wilson is expected to play in that game here. But going back to this game against the Arizona Cardinals, this is a battle between 2 really banged-up football teams, Sayre. I mean, obviously, we know no Kyler Murray in this game, no Russell Wilson. You look at all the injuries for the Broncos in the offensive line. You look at the Arizona Cardinals. They lose Colt McCoy in this game. You look at their defense. They're all banged up. There are a lot of excuses to be potentially made for both teams, right? But you know what? We don't play the excuses game here. We look at things for what they are. The Broncos defense, as you and I have discussed here, even without Kyler Murray, they have to find a way to get after Colt McCoy, and they have to find a way to take the football away. They did just that. Unfortunately, Colt McCoy left the game with a concussion and did not return. Trace McSorley stepped into this game in his absence here. But the Broncos, they have found a way in the last several games there to generate takeaways. And more importantly, after they generate takeaways like interceptions, fumble recoveries, whatever you may have, the Broncos offense is finding ways to capitalize off of it, which is a huge thing.
It's very, very huge, Cody, because it's one thing to get the takeaways in the first place, but we've been complaining a lot this season about wasted, takeaways, wasted turnovers. And once again, in this game, we did see an example of that. Like you mentioned, the Broncos went into halftime with a 9-3 deficit. That was after Justin Simmons had an interception, set the Broncos up with great field position. Obviously, then Brandon McManus misses a 38-yard field goal there. So you're in a really tough position. Broncos could have been up 6-0. Instead, it was tied 3-3 after the Cardinals went back and scored. And so it's a 6-point swing. And then by halftime, then you're down by 6. So that domino effect, I think everyone needs to understand there's a domino effect to something. It's not just like you can't point to one thing. So thankfully the Broncos were able to rally in this game, Cody. The barrage of interceptions, I personally am a huge fan of it. I think at some point here or another, Damari Mathis going to get into this mix here. He was this close to one in this game. He dove for it. He was really close. K'Wan Williams had another one go through his hands. So, the Broncos are getting their hands on the ball. They are so good in coverage, and I think we see that all throughout the year. Unfortunately, we just really don't get to highlight it a ton on this show because we're too busy having to talk about the offensive woes and the things that are going wrong on that side of the ball. But the Broncos have one of the best secondaries in the league. We saw 2 interceptions in this game from Justin Simmons. We saw another interception back-to-back games now for Pat Surtain. So you're looking at these last couple of games here. You're like, okay, Josie Jewell, he had a pair of interceptions last week. Now, the last 2 weeks, Pat Surtain, he has 2 interceptions. Justin Simmons picks off the Cardinals quarterbacks twice. So to me, Cody, you look at this secondary gaining some momentum here. I know the playoffs are out of the question, but I really think you have a chance here to go into the offseason on a very, very high note because the Broncos, remember early in the season, the story was a lot of forced fumbles that they just simply, they weren't bouncing the Broncos' way or they couldn't fall on them, or it was just unlucky the way that things kind of transpired with all that. They've been getting their hands on the ball all year long. Now to see them creating those turnovers, the interceptions, you got to be kind of licking your chops a little bit, right? Going up against Baker Mayfield. I know he's playing in Sean McVay's scheme. I know he had the really nice debut on Thursday night last week and things like that. We'll see how he does against the Green Bay Packers here. But to me, I think that secondary, it's kind of like a white hot hitter in baseball or a red hot 3-point shooter in the NBA. You're so hot right now that you just can't help but think that ball is going to continue to roll. It's like a big snowball going down a hill at this point. I think the Broncos secondary, Cody, they're primed to finish the season as strong as any unit on this team.
I think it's worth noting, too. You look at all the weapons that Arizona had. Granted, you don't have Kyler Murray. That's a huge loss for them. I can't understate that enough, how big of a loss Kyler Murray not being on the field was for the Arizona Cardinals. But you look at guys like DeAndre Hopkins fully healthy, Marquise Hollywood Brown fully healthy, Robbie Anderson fully healthy, Greg Dortch has been making some plays, Rondale Moore's out there, Trey McBride is out there, James Conner. They had a relatively healthy offense minus Kyler Murray. So for the Broncos to go out there and do that now, that is a huge thing. The takeaways, Justin Simmons in this game, Sayre, 2 interceptions on the day for him. And at this point too, right, we all remember just several weeks ago, he had a 2 interception performance against the Baltimore Ravens as well. Now with these 2 picks here for Simmons on the day, that makes it 3 consecutive seasons in the row for the Broncos all-pro safety where he's had 5+ interceptions. And I believe he's the first player in the NFL to do that for 3 consecutive seasons. He's a special player, but what's even more impressive about that, he's missed time this year due to injuries, and he's done this in 9 games of action, which always makes us ask the question, what if Simmons didn't miss a single game this year? How many more interceptions would he have? I think a lot of the whole talk, everyone's like looking at the Broncos because they're a losing team. I still think that Justin Simmons will get his rightful due from national media. I think he deserves that respect, absolutely, because he has been a consistent ball hawk and playmaker for the Broncos defense. 3 seasons in a row, 5+ interceptions. There's so much still to come with this Broncos team. 3 games remaining. He has a chance to amplify those numbers, maybe even get a career high in interceptions for his career. But I also think it's special, and it's worth noting here, with the 2 interceptions in Sunday's game against the Arizona Cardinals to help the Denver Broncos win, Simmons now sits at 26 career interceptions, surpassing Steve Atwater as a safety.
Wow.
Steve had 24 in his career for a Bronco. Simmons now at 26, and the relationship that these two guys have with one another, man, that's special, and that's a big moment here for Justin Simmons. I like I said, there's not a lot for Broncos fans to be excited about how the season has gone, right? But there's things you mentioned in this earlier part of the segment you can build on going into the season. If the Broncos build on some momentum going into the offseason, it maybe changes things a little bit. Randy Gregory made his debut after being sidelined since week 4, had a chance to talk with him after the game one-on-one. And he said, I just kind of felt good to get out there. For him, he said, I still have to work off a little bit of rust. He wanted a little bit more one-on-one, but they kept bringing some tight ends and they kept bringing the running back to chip him on certain situations as well. So we'll see more from Randy Gregory down the stretch. Surtain, another interception. Broncos capitalizing in a big way here in a big time 24-15 win for them to improve to 4-10 on the season. A fun second half for everybody in Broncos country. But Broncos country, the Broncos won a game without Russell Wilson. He's set to return next week against the Los Angeles Rams. What are some things that need to be addressed this week as the Broncos prepare to take on the LA Rams? Baker Mayfield, potentially Aaron Donald. You'll get that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. But this episode of the show is brought to you by friends over at Prize Picks. With the Prize Picks app, you choose 2 to 5 players that you're focused on heading into the week. And these players, they'll have a projection set by Prize Picks, and you simply choose whether or not they will have more or less than their Prize Picks projection, which could allow you to win 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up today and play daily fantasy sports. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Russell Wilson will be back for the Denver Broncos this week against the Los Angeles Rams, but the Broncos will have to make some adjustments along the way here this week if they want to ensure that Russ can be effective on the football field. We take a little bit of a deeper dive into the Broncos offense and some of the storylines that we'll be looking at this week here on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Sayre, my friend, I think for the Broncos in this game, the fact that they were able to amass over 170 yards on the ground between Latavius Murray's 130 yards, Marlon Mack, these two guys, in my opinion, right? And I'm eager for your thoughts on this. I'm eager for Broncos country's thoughts on this. I feel like watching these two guys run the football, Sayre, I feel like both of them have earned a contract to come back for the Broncos next season. And here's why, right? I think that these two guys have proven they could be the combination of smash and dash a little bit, but to the extent where you don't put too much pressure on Javonte Williams to have to rush his way back from this knee injury. We have no idea what the timetable may be for Javonte, but I feel like Marlon Mack and Latavius Murray have both proven that they can be great options while he gets ready. I'm eager for your thoughts on this one.
I completely agree with that, Cody. And I think that these two guys are very interesting in terms of, you look at Latavius Murray, and I tweeted about this during or right after the game. I think you really have to tip your cap to the guy because, man, in a day and age where running backs, I mean, just in general, I guess it's not even this day and age. It's kind of like all throughout the course of NFL history, the shelf life of a running back in the NFL is very short, and so for him to be playing into his 30s. I mean, I just turned 33 this year, Cody, so I can empathize with Latavius Murray there a little bit in terms of, hey, you're at the top of your game, baby. So, I mean, he's out there playing really well into his 30s. I mean, he's definitely, in terms of NFL running backs, he's on borrowed time. Can we say that? And he's out there. He's a big physical guy. He's always available. He doesn't ever he doesn't ever really forsake his physicality out there. He doesn't try to avoid contact. He welcomes the contact. And it's not to say that his style of play is reckless either. So I love what he brings to the table. I think he's absolutely worthy of bringing back. You look at a similar deal to what the Broncos maybe gave to Melvin Gordon last year in free agency, around 1 year, $2.5 million or something like that. Maybe some incentives for playing time. I think that's very reasonable for what Latavius Murray has brought to the table. And I think also with Marlon Mack, a very different story from his perspective, because his career seemingly was almost over just a couple years ago, right? He had the bad injuries in Indianapolis after back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Nobody was sure if he would regain that explosiveness. To me, what I'm seeing, the more reps that he's getting, that explosiveness, it's either creeping its way back in or it's fully back, and we're just now starting to see it. And I think that definitely, if you're a Broncos fan who follows the NFL draft closely, tons of Broncos fans loved Marlon Mack coming out of college back in, I believe it was 2017 NFL draft. And he went to the Colts, obviously had a lot of success. Now he's in Denver doing it in the running game and the passing game. Like you said, Cody, a little smash and dash from these guys. Don't want to get too carried away, but at the same time, you can see, just like with the secondary defensively, you can see the momentum just slowly creeping up and slowly building week in and week out with this running game, regardless even. And this game is a perfect example of who the offensive line personnel are.
Yeah, that's another point we'll dive into. And I think ideally you're going to carry 3 running backs on the roster next year. Javonte Williams, Latavius Murray, Marlon Mack. That is a running back room that I'd be certainly okay with, Sayre, here as we break down everything here. Locked On Broncos. You mentioned offensive line personnel. Well, Quinn Miners obviously left this game with an eye injury, had to leave the stadium, and went and visited with an eye specialist. He's considered day-to-day, but he got poked in the eye. Tom Compton had to come in, and at this point, we're like, oh, man, what is going on with the offensive line depth? There were times in our head where like, this is where you would like a guy like Netani Muti on your active roster, because not only that, Dalton Reisner also left a little bit early with an elbow injury. Luckily, he was able to return, but when the Broncos had to put Luke Wattenberg and Tom Compton at the guard spot, that's when the Arizona Cardinals really took advantage of the Broncos' interior offensive line with various stunt packages. J.J. Watt took advantage of Tom Compton. He also had a couple of moments where he took advantage of Luke Wattenberg, and Brett Rypien took some shots. And I want to applaud Brett Rypien. I thought Brett commanded the offense really well today for the Broncos, delivered some great throws, especially to Jerry Jeudy. 7 catches, 76 yards for the Broncos wide receiver. Didn't have the 3 touchdown performance that he had last week, but he was still effective, and he had various first downs, chain-moving catches as well. He threw a touchdown, obviously, to Eric Tomlinson. Also threw an interception. And Sayre, I will say that Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett told us after the game in the media press conference that he told Brett to be aggressive on that play, to take a shot downfield. And also, Brett had a really good argument because he was arguing with the ref that there was a defender who jumped off sides. Looking back on the replay, he had a real legitimate gripe. So in a situation like that, would have been considered a free play, even though that Budda Baker intercepted it. Ideally, there would be a situation where the Broncos, maybe don't, it gets overturned or something like that. They call the penalty. Okay, Denver gets a do-over. Instead, the Cardinals took over on their own 3-yard line. Then we saw Justin Simmons jump and obviously get an interception of his own there. So they really capitalized on that. In your opinion, the offensive line, sir, this is where I think we can focus. We can actually probably dive deeper on this on a subject of Locked On Broncos this week as we interact with Broncos country. But I felt like watching this game, seeing a couple of plays, I just don't know why Calvin Anderson continues to get the short end of the stick here on the Broncos offensive line. Obviously, we saw Billy Turner return from the knee injury that he had, which slid Cam Fleming from right tackle to left tackle. At left tackle, I felt like Calvin was playing pretty well, but ultimately, the Broncos offensive line made some good adjustments in the second half. They were able to get things going on the ground game with Eric Tomlinson, Eric Saubert helping block and lead along the way here. So I guess we won't focus on all the negative. We'll touch on that a little bit this week here, Locked On Broncos. Any closing thoughts here for everybody in Broncos country on the Broncos 24-15 victory, Empower Field at Mile High?
Well, it feels good to get a win, doesn't it? It feels good to kind of get one back under your belt. Yes, you're 4-10, but at the same time, we're building momentum towards next season at this point. Now you get a chance to build off of a victory and see what this team can do, Cody. And if I'm putting the tinfoil hat on here, you have multiple games in a row now. 28 points against Kansas City, put up a really good fight against the Chiefs. 24 points, and you looked like the better team against the Arizona Cardinals. All things considered, right? Both teams utilizing backup quarterbacks, both teams very banged up injury-wise. But I thought when I did the crossover with Alex Clancy, he made a very good point. He said from the Cardinals' perspective, you want to see Cliff Kingsbury go out there and outcoach a guy like Nathaniel Hackett, who's kind of been getting dogged on by everybody in the national media, in the Denver, Broncos fans. It doesn't matter who. So for Nathaniel Hackett, if I'm putting the tinfoil hat on, are these last couple weeks, could he be building a case to return next season? Maybe we'll talk about that going forward. I know that my dogs are going to be excited about it, Cody. I see Loki is going to be excited to find out as well. For those of you who are just listening, Cody's cat, my dogs in the background, just excited. They're excited about the game, right? They're excited about the victory. Everybody's in good spirits. So that's where I'm at, Cody, and I hope everybody is ready for a great Christmas week. I love it that the Broncos are playing on Christmas. I can't remember the last time that happened, so I'm excited to see them play against the Los Angeles Rams. Should be a fun time and a great start to the week here. A victory Monday for the Broncos against the Cardinals.
And now we shift our focus to Christmas matchup against the NFC West. Los Angeles Rams, defending Super Bowl champions who are going through struggles of their own. Baker Mayfield, now the quarterback there, Russell Wilson, we know will make his return in that game. Will the Broncos put coal in the Rams' stockings, or will the Los Angeles Rams reveal a very, very not so secret to everybody who is hopeful on Christmas as well? We'll dive into all that this week here on the Lockdown Broncos podcast. We'll have you covered with everything going on at practice in Dove Valley, courtesy Lockdown Broncos. Thank you so much, Broncos country, tuning in, making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Sayre and I will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of the show.